Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. Joining us as always, the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on the Twitters. Andrew, it's the opening day of the Democrat National Committee, and can you just feel the joy? All of the joy.
I know the energy is overwhelming. These things used to be important.
This one should have been. This one should have been important, right? Because they replaced, they took the nominee off the ballot, and you'd think with the convention right around the corner, you could just say, "Hey, look, let's have an open convention. Let's protect democracy by using democracy." And they didn't do that.
Nancy wasn't willing to risk that. You have to see the candidate. You have to nominate the candidate before you get to see him. When I was little and started watching these things, the first conventions were on television in 1952 from Chicago, from the International Amphitheater, which doesn't exist anymore. And that's where the 68 convention was. And the first convention, all the TV stuff was so heavy and cumbersome. I mean, cameras, huge cameras on wheels, that both parties agreed to hold it in the same place. So they did. And I remember in those days, you had things like a roll call vote, and then Mississippi would say, "Mr. Chairman, the great state of Mississippi with 16 votes has chosen to change its vote from Howard Taft to Dwight Eisenhower," and then there'd be an uproar, and that was news, right? I mean, it wasn't all prearranged. Stuff was happening for real. That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it's because of the primary system. The primary system pretty much usually takes the drama out of it. Now, I don't go back to 1952. I have seen film of that though, so I'm aware of the 1952 conventions, but I go back to like 76, right? I mean, I was too young for Chicago.
You're just a kid.
I really was. I was 13 in 1976, and I was like following the Republican primary thing, and it came down to the convention. It was Ford was in the lead, but it was still not necessarily settled. So it was kind of a sort of open convention, and of course Reagan just decided not to contest it, and decided to throw in with Ford for the good of the party, and didn't turn it into a contest. But we were still counting delegates, right? At that point in time. And then in '84, you had the Democrats do it with Mondale, right? Because Mondale didn't go into that convention with a lock on it. He was by far out in front, but he hadn't actually confirmed enough voted delegates to win the nomination. And when they got to the convention, it's the same sort of deal. They just said, "Okay, well, we don't want to get into a convention floor fight. Mondale's won this." But other than those two things, these are usually pro forma. But I mean, in this particular instance, right? And the reason why I bring this up is because I'm not the only person who's saying, what Democrats did here is fishy as hell. Maureen Dowd in the New York Times called it a coup over the weekend. I don't know if you saw that column.
Yeah.
Now, the funny part about that is what she's complaining about is them pushing Biden off the ticket. At the same time, she acknowledges that Biden needed to be pushed off the ticket, and she doesn't even mention the fact that they didn't use the democratic process that's opened up today to choose the new nominee. I mean, they could have had an actual convention where the candidates who wanted to run for it could get up and speak, and the delegates could have a few different rounds of ballots. I mean, it still would have probably been mostly collegial. I don't know. Wouldn't have been entirely collegial. It would have been mostly collegial. And it may have only taken a couple of ballots. But the thing is, Andrew, and I really want to get your opinion on this, I am convinced that the one candidate that wouldn't have survived that process was Kamala Harris.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Historical anecdote that I find fascinating. A century ago this summer, 100 years, the Democrats met in New York City, and they had 104 ballots. It took 2 weeks to nominate John Davis to lose to Calvin Coolidge.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Did I tell you
I
about
love it.
Did I tell you about the conclave that took 2.5 years to elect the Pope?
Oh no,
You ever hear about that one?
no, that was
mean,
before my time.
it was before my time too. It was like in the 13th century, and that's where the
Yeah,
term conclave comes from, because they were in the town. The cardinals were in this town in Italy, and I for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the town now. Um, but they got so sick and tired of these cardinals being there that they physically locked them in the building so they couldn't get out. And then when they still would, because they were eating all the food, right? They were eating all the food and drinking all the drink, and they still wouldn't come to a decision. They took the roof off of the building and forced them to live in the open air. And I think 2 or 3 cardinals actually died during the process of that
holy smokes.
conclave. And they finally came up with a pope after they ran out of food and ran out of roof. And I went through that town. For the life of me, I can't think of the name of it now. But yeah, so conventions, right?
Yeah,
Conventions, but I just find it fascinating that the Democrat Party, whose main message this cycle is defending democracy,
yeah,
didn't use the democracy, at least representative democracy that they had on hand to choose their candidate.
exactly.
And I think if you watch, what Kamala Harris has been doing lately, you understand why she had to be anointed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Well, I guess they're counting on a fluke of history. I don't know, but by merits, she shouldn't get a vote. But the reality is, because of the other guy in the race, it could end up being close. Geez, I hope not, but it could.
and you're right about that, right? And we're going to get to your column about Trump here, but I mean, you had Kamala Harris. First off, it's been 4 weeks and a day since Joe Biden left the race. It's been 4 weeks, more or less, since she has been the anointed replacement on that ticket. And she still has yet to do a press conference or any sort of formal interview with any reporter. Well, not even informal interview. She took a couple of questions. I think it was over the weekend, and that was it. But she got up to do her big economic plan rollout, and she announced that she was very opposed to price gauging.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that correction on the transcript.
Price gauging, and she said it as gauging, and didn't blink. Right? Didn't even occur to her that she'd used the wrong term. This does not build confidence in somebody's economic policy, and frankly, the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, they all went after the economic policy. And I don't think any of the 3 of them actually mentioned the fact that she used price gauging rather than price gouging. They went after it. They criticized it on its demerits, which is good. I'm glad to see that they had a little bit of independence of spirit. I don't think it's going to last. But were you surprised? I mean, were you surprised that they weren't carrying the water right off the bat?
Not surprised by the media, and I guess not surprised by her performance. You see all these film clips of her cropping up on Twitter, and they're, I guess I should say she should be embarrassed, but she's not. She's blithely enough. And the oligarchy that put her in office isn't embarrassed either. They picked her as the handiest theoretically electable candidate, and because she's not really got a brain, they'll just pour in, as they did with Biden, they pour in the words that they want to come out of her mouth, and she can have all the perks and celebrityhood of it. I mean, and the historical role if she becomes president. God help us. And right now, we're still sort of in the honeymoon, and she's not doing an interview. And actually, if I was advising her, I would say don't do an interview until September. One, school is starting, people are paying attention there. Some people are still on vacation. It's summertime. Wait until just before the debate and maybe do an interview to set up the debate. If she's prepped or drugged or drunk or whatever enough she is to do it, um, and then count on a wonderful performance in the September debate, September 10th debate. I
Yeah,
don't think,
no,
yeah, I don't think
I'd
it'll
actually
happen.
say, I'd actually say if I thought the problem was inexperience, and it's not, but if I thought the problem was inexperience, I might suggest do an interview now, get through it, learn a few things, and then
Yeah,
do interviews after Labor
yeah,
Day.
you could do it.
Do it now when people aren't paying much attention.
That's what some candidates remember. Sarah Palin, when she was coming up on her debate with Joe Biden, um, she was in debate prep, and then they put her on the phone with 2 or 3 conservative radio hosts to do interviews, which there wasn't any great news out of it, but she got a feel for it. They got a feel for what her weak spot was. She got a feel for what the questions were going to be. And so she got some practice, and the radio stations felt like they were being treated special. John Kennedy used to do that all the time as sort of practice before news conferences. He'd give somebody an exclusive interview, knowing full well that wasn't going to appear in the newspaper until the next day anyway. So yeah, it's politics, and modern politics have become appearances.
Yeah.
And it's got little to do with substance. The questions have little to do with anything a president's going to be asked to do. What you said this about abortion in 1999. How do you feel now? I mean, it's just a joke. Or Senator, we've got 60 seconds left. How would you bring about world peace? I mean, it it's showbiz. It's showbiz. That's what it's become.
No, I agree.
Um,
That's the reason why
yeah.
interviews should be more important.
Yes, exactly. If you're confident enough to pull it off. Now, she can look like she's pulling it off, but if you listen to it, it's complete ear. I mean, it's like eating cheese pops or cheese corn. There's nothing there to chew on. They see her explaining the cloud.
Oh,
There
yeah,
were
that was great.
yeah, it's up here, right? It's up here. It's not in a place anymore.
She thought it was an
Um,
active cloud.
yeah, yeah, I know it. Well, there's several other ones where she's explaining how democracy works. Um,
Yeah, that one
how
was circulating in the last couple of days. Yeah,
I mean, but I've got a list of them. They're just they're well, they are comprehensible if you're 4 years old, but it's not otherwise useful, and
right.
it doesn't impress listeners.
All right, I want to get to your column, your VIP column over at redstate.com, because that's, you are the regent of redstate.com.
That's correct. That's correct, Ed, and I'm glad you recognize that.
I was the first to recognize it.
That's correct.
I will say
That's
that.
correct. You have created all of my titles: Prince of Twitter, Regent of Red State.
I've tried a couple other ones. Those are the two that stick, though.
No, they stick. They're stick, and they're worthwhile. I put them on my Twitter page as a badge of honor. It's kind of like the badges that generals wear, on their coat. It's important. It's important. I deserve the recognition, and I'm glad to get it. Just at least between you and me.
So, quick story, because I know you'll appreciate this. A couple of family members and I play Wordle and Connections, right? They're New York Times games. And then we message each other with the results, right? And I haven't played Connections in a while. And I finally got back to playing it. And one of my family members, you know, I put I put it out and nobody said anything, right? And I was on the phone with one of my family members about this, and I said, and I pointed out that I'd played Connections for the first time in at least several weeks, and she says, "What do you want? A performance medal?" I said, "Yes." So she sent me one today. A little performance medal emoji. So
that's fun. That's
that's
fun.
all right. So does Donald Trump need to reset? I'm not sure what the answer to this is because I'm not sure if Donald Trump can reset. I mean, he's
Yeah.
made it clear that he wants to continue doing what he's done because at least it's succeeded once in the past. But I think he does need to reset. This is a different race now, and he needs to rethink it.
Yeah, I'm not sure he can, to be honest, but I'm sure he needs to. My preferred headline with that is Donald Trump trying to lose, or can he listen? And it's true. Now, I don't know who he listens to or if he listens to them. Ramaswamy says that Trump has been receptive several times when he called him to suggest a reset. Nothing has happened yet. But after or in the debate and after for a while, he was presidential. You could look at him and say, yeah, that's a president. He knows what he's talking about. He has quick recall. He's not calling people names, and criticizing Republicans, all that crap. He was acting presidential. And then Kamala Harris came in and he completely lost it. And he's still lost it. He may be able to win this way because she's so bad, but there's a lot of people that think he's so bad and that she may not be bad. So he does need to get back to the talking about the issues, the future. Stop talking about 2020. Stop being angry all the time. We don't want an angry president. Remember that one of the few things that the mainstream media talked about when Biden was losing it was he looked angry. We don't want an angry president. We want a grandpa, and we understand he can be firm with us or scold people or whatever, but he doesn't call people lunatics. And it's just, and I'm afraid he's going to lose it, lose the race. I hope not. But he needs to listen to people, not necessarily me, but to people who want him to win, but are bothered by his childish, self-centered behavior.
Well, I mean, yeah. And I think it's him venting his id for his own purposes and not acting strategically, or at least that's the way it seems.
Well, excuse me, I didn't finish. If in 2015 and 16, this shtick was real, it was genuine, and it was refreshing compared to the other 16 Republican schlumps on the stage, and he waxed their butts. I mean, he just took them to the cleaners. And he was the only one out of that. Imagine that. A Fifth Avenue billionaire was the only one who could tap into the anger and frustration in the heartland and run with it. And when he ran his policies as president, 98% of them I agreed with. Not always his behavior, but the policies I agreed with so I could put up with the behavior. But right now, Americans have a choice. You didn't have a choice when he was president. Right now, he needs to develop. He was in showbiz. He needs to develop a new act, and the new act is being presidential, and it goes against all of his instincts to punch you in the face, and the fact. I hope they don't have a crowd for the debate in September because he'll play to them. the beauty of the last debate was there was no crowd, so he could be presidential. It's too tempting for him.
There was no crowd, and the mics were timed.
Yeah.
So he had to be disciplined about what he was saying.
Yeah. And he could be. He could be.
Yeah.
It's not that. Yeah. It's just too tempted to not be. And I understand his thinking if you're thinking short term, and that is, well, this worked 8 years ago. But then I would point out, well, it didn't work 4 years ago. So let's try something new. And I hope he does.
This has to be a referendum on Biden and Harris rather than a referendum on Trump.
Yeah,
and they're trying to make it a referendum on Trump.
That's right.
That just plays into it. That just plays into it. And I think Trump feels that if it's that he would win in a landslide, and any result that is other than that is somehow dishonest. But that's just not the case. There are a lot of people who really dislike this guy, who find him dangerous. There are a lot of people who don't like Biden or Harris, and they're going to vote against them no matter what. You have to capture the people in the middle. And in order to do that, you have to be, attractive to them. In some way, shape, or form, you have to be able to be attractive to them. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the people who are attracted to that pugnacious style are already voting for him.
That's correct. Absolutely correct. And he plays to them. Well, it's understandable. He loves to hear the cheers, and they love to cheer him. But the last 3 elections, counting this one, have turned out not to be voting for someone, but to be voting against someone.
That's right.
Voting against Hillary, against Trump, and now there's 2 people to vote against. So that's trouble. And I speak from experience. 1976, a lot of people voted against Ford because of his pardon of Nixon, and maybe didn't fully think Jimmy Carter. And look what we got. Well, it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to do that. And so everybody think, well, I'm not going to vote for Trump. I'll vote for what's her name, Giggles. Well,
got to give them a reason to vote for you. That's the bottom line. We're going to have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, I'm up against another commitment. But I do want to leave you time in case you've got a joke. I want to leave you time for a joke.
I do. If you've got one, you go ahead. Okay.
I've got one. So here it is. On the first day of college, the dean addressed the students, pointing out some of the rules. The female dormitory is out of bounds for all male students, and the male dormitory out of bounds to all the female students. Anyone caught breaking this rule will be fined $20 the first time. The second time, it's $60, and the third time, it's $180. Does anybody have any questions? And one of the guys in the back of the crowd stood up and says, "How much for a season pass?"
I like that. I like that. I have one here. These are all old, but Jimmy Fallon. He says, news organizations actually telling people now what to do in case of a nuclear attack. They say people should immediately stay inside and keep watching Netflix. I thought I had another one here. They have the slug line, Ed.
That's a good slug line.
Yeah, but I know you got to go. So
we do, but
I'll find it next
week. Yeah, hold on to it till next week. We'll talk again. We'll analyze the Democrat convention next week. Andrew Malcolm, the prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com, at @HMalcolm on the Twitters. We'll talk then, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Edward. Thanks, everybody. See you then.